Hi, so I'm here to talk to you about filmmaking for fieldwork, which is a way of both exploring the world and expressing your research or your place in the world. So we're not just looking at filmmaking as a way to represent your research, but we're looking at filmmaking as a primary means of exploration, a primary means of research. Okay. It's a cinematic method. We use traditional documentary filmmaking methods and apply them to research across many disciplines, from anthropology, history, sociology, midwifery, we've had town planning, geography, all sorts of different disciplines we use to as a research practice as well as something to represent the research findings. This was developed within the subject area of anthropology over many, many years, and I teach here at University of Manchester in the Granada Centre for Vision Anthropology, and also at the Free University in Berlin and in Bern in media anthropology departments. But we run a filmmaking for fieldwork short course, which I have some information on some cards here, and in that's been a project to extend ethnography and filmmaking outside of anthropology to other disciplines. Okay. I would argue that it's an epistemic practice as well. It's a way of knowing the world. Through using a camera, you enter into a certain fieldwork relationship, a certain engagement with your subject, a certain intersubjective relationship with your subject, and you're recording information or experience, if you like, at the speed of sound and light as it's happening. It's a way of uncovering experience, looking at what constitutes experience. Okay? And in this way, it's a way of becoming to know the world. I'll whip through some of this background. It really developed in the 1960s at the time of the new wave in cinema, when lightweight camera equipment, exactly like the one you see there, became available, and rather than have to use tripods in studios, camera equipment could go out into the world and become mobile. You will probably know about the French New Wave and latter-day projects like Lars von Trier's Dogma 95 and all things that constrain filmmaking practice to some degree to try and get to a deeper reality that may or may not exist out there. So this is someone typically using a small handheld camera on location in Peru. We've followed broadly the observational model in developing this, but we don't really stick to any specific dogma in 2017. We use methods tied to the observational method, lightweight, handheld camera, close to your subject, but then in the editing and the construction and the choice of mode of documentary, it's very broad beyond the observational method. What does it offer? New ways of knowing your subject that are developed through each stage in the production of a film: concept, production, editing, screening and distribution. At each stage, mainly production and editing and concept, mainly pre-production, production and post-production, there is something to be understood about your subject. There's methods in cinema that also suit methods in social science research. Okay? And we're not only interested in using images and sound to provide illustrative data for analysis or demonstration, we want to make compelling films that express the stance of the filmmaker and the relationship between filmmaker and subject. Okay? And these will also serve as a sort of impact generator for your work. It's going to reach a wider audience. So how can it be considered as epistemic practice? Here we go, where are we? I'm going to summarize this all in one go, but don't try reading this, it's a bit too much here for a short presentation. Right, I'm going to summarize this while you look at this quote from the writer Michael Jackson, not the late singer-songwriter. So basically, filmmaking has always dealt very well with human experience. A film is an experience of experience, developing into an experience of the audience. You're exploring the experience of others through your own experience with the camera, and then sharing that with an audience who are having another cinematic experience. Now, experience, like the word interesting, doesn't mean anything. People use it a lot in modern research, but it doesn't mean anything apart from what's inside it. And so we've sort of thought, well, what is inside experience? There's emotion, the way we feel, there's what we do, the strategies we employ, and there's the impacts we have on the world around us and others. So anthropology is concerned with the relations between people and things. And if we want to understand human experience from a phenomenological point of view, or from as experience unfolds, rather than simply the way it's narrated later on, there's a great difference between an experience as it's narrated and experience as it unfolds. Filmmaking is very good at looking at how experience unfolds. You're recording images at the speed of light and sound at the speed of sound, and it happens very differently than writing, which has to happen on the margins of the field. Writing is a conceptual process that becomes a concept, travels through your body, and then you write down an interpretation of what's happening. The camera, of course, is framing images and recording sounds, and you're choosing what to edit later on. But to some degree, sentences are preserved as they're recorded. And when you come to use those in the presentation of that work, you're tied to the way those sentences have been cast as you record them. So as you edit them, you're constantly re-engaging with your ethnography, with your primary fieldwork notes. You're using those materials in their original form to some degree and carrying that through to the final experience in the cinema. So I personally think that what filmmaking has to offer is a way of exploring human experience through, let's move along to this. So how do we look at experience? Emotion is expressed by the face, strategy expressed by the hands most commonly, and impact expressed through the productivity of an action. Now, if we want to look at that, think of that as an anthropologist, a social science researcher, we can observe and make notes. But if we're looking to make a film, these can all end up close-up shots. They're effectively close-up shots that will make the scenes in our film. Okay? We can develop a method we called the triangle of action, where you can film a face, you can follow the emotion of that down to the hands, see what the hands are doing, how the strategy is being implemented, through to the result of that action. And you can create a triangle that actually has some sort of understanding. And each process that you film is linked to another process. So when we were teaching students how to make films, and we say you need your wide angle, your establishing shot, your medium shot, and your close-ups. And our film is just a combination of wide, medium, and close shots. And they're saying, well, what do we get on the close-up? And then we start to think, well, actually, what serves cinema also serves social science research. In order to get close with the camera and start recording these things, we then end up with information that once we take back to the edit suite, we experiment with how these things fit together, and the editing process becomes an analytic process. It becomes a place to develop theory. It becomes a place to extend the research beyond the moment when you're doing field work and shooting a film. Once you get back to the edit suite, you are then analysing and processing your material. How you choose to present that requires a certain degree of reflexivity in your work to make your own stance obvious. That can be done with recording your own voice in the material that you shoot, or we're less keen on voiceovers and title cards and things like that, which is a certain sensibility of aesthetics. But there is, central to this whole method is emotion, strategy, and impact. And that is what constitutes human experience. The word experience is a very popular word in academia now, but people don't so often deconstruct what experience is. And then if we're going to employ a method, how do we have a method that engages directly with this so-called experience? I see the filmmaking process in the field like a dance, like a kind of cine dance. It's a dance where you're never the leader, you're always the led. Your subject is always leading you, and you're responding through your fieldwork relationships with your subjects. And so in that sense, you're on a level. I always commit to showing a cut of the final film to my subjects, even at the risk of the film not being acceptable to them and having to change something, which is what makes it very different than mainstream documentary filmmaking. It's a way of challenging epistemic violence, if you heard that word, a way of incorporating the subject's ideas through a reflexive process and a participatory process into the work. Okay, so I've cut to the chase here in case we run out of time, which is why I've skipped over the other things. We teach this. So this is an interesting quote. A film becomes sensuously and sensibly manifest as the expression of experience by experience. Okay, complicated words. He's a media analyst, so that's why. But it's actually a beautiful way of saying, you know, what a film is and how experience is intertwined and how it becomes something that where you can share your vulnerability with your subjects and reduce the idea of epistemic imposition or imposing order onto your subjects that doesn't exist there. We teach this through 3 exercises. The process, which is central, where we really establish this method of teaching the triangle of action, the way to explore human experience and the way that fits into a cinema production. The testimony, rather than interview, we look more at how words emanate from a subject, how words operate on a subject's own terms, rather than interviews where we're using structured or semi-structured interviews to provoke a response. We're interested in more what rises up rather than what we're particularly seeking to get. And the events, which is basically how processes and testimonies come together in a wider social happening. So we use these 3 exercises to teach filmmaking at a foundational level. Once you understand how to film processes, testimonies and events, you can apply that to any situation anywhere in the world, regardless if you speak the language or not. You can always follow the emotion of a scene, and you can end up with material that's going to be useful to develop your research during the shooting and in post-production. So let's it's editing, recording sound. You know, really you can break it down into 3 skill sets: recording images, recording sound, and storytelling through editing. Okay, that's what we teach: images, sound, and editing. In storytelling, it's all about finding a narrative. It's about understanding that everything is narrative. However much we might want to destroy narrative, turn it around, we can play with narrative, but we need to surrender our own narratives and our own ideas and our own intellectual capabilities to the narratives of our subject and understand their narratives and intertwine ourselves in those narratives. Recording sound, at a technical level, it's all about getting the microphone in close and recording at an acceptable level. So you end up with a quality material that can be used both to express your work in the end, and with images, it's about using manual functions to control the camera, and we're looking to get professional looking outputs of work, which is generally done by simplifying the process and becoming manually in control of your craft. Okay. So image, sound and storytelling, the 3 main technical areas. Approach-related areas, fieldwork relationships are very important. How to develop them, how to maintain them, how to look after them. What and how to film. Okay, very broad question, but it's often one that crops up in my mind. When do I put the camera on? When do I turn it off? How do I do filming? And ethics and reflexivity. You know, very important in any sort of research-based project to have a very sophisticated and comprehensive consideration of ethics. This will also help you develop your stance in the field and your own reflexivity in your project, and it will be necessary to right, let's skip along here. see if there's anything else interesting I was going to say. Most especially an impact. Where do we teach it? All over the place. Short course in the summer. If anyone is interested, we run a short course, 2-week summer course in July the 2nd to the 12th this year at FutureWorks School of Media just down the road. And it's a 11-day, very intensive course, and I think it's $1,095 for students and $1,475 or something like that for funded or lecturers. We run that every year. This will be our 10th year. If anyone's interested in that, you can ask me afterwards. A very good example of, on my website, Filmmaking for Fieldwork Co UK, in the F4F project work, a very good example of this is Dr. Eleanor Barabant-Sever from the Department of International Relations, who did a very, this is her working here, it's me on the camera, Kieran, who you might have seen around as well on sound, are two subjects, and this is the researcher Eleanor from International Relations, and we worked together to produce a film called British Born Chinese about two boys' experience of growing up in Manchester as Mancunian boys with Chinese heritage and how they balanced out their Chineseness with their Britishness. So we undertake project work with people as well on when they have research funding, larger scale projects. But Eleanor came along and did our course. So generally people come through the course and then we work with them.